So, talking TT02, so here is my standard TT02 that's been modified a fair bit so far. This one's actually the banner image for my YouTube channel for my RC stuff. There are actually some upgrades I can do to this. I may as well do that while we're on the subject of TT02s. Let me go grab my parts. Okay, I got them. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to put on all the adjustable turnbuckles for the TT02. There's these little, racing ones, not the best, but it'll look better than stock at least. But while I'm doing that, I also want to remove these black ball studs since, well, I'll just make them all the Tamiya brass ones. Since I think it would look a little bit goofy to have two black and the rest be brass, so keep it all looking uniform. So anyway, so this TT02 started as a standard TT02, of course. I have the AMG GT3 body for it. That is still in need of complete work being done. It's untrimmed, unpainted, no decals. And I've never done any body painting or anything like that, so that's kind of why it's been delayed so long. I'm actually wondering if there's maybe anyone near me, any shops, or just hobby shops, maybe someone working there might actually be willing to do all the body work. That would be sweet, because I don't know what I'm doing with that, and I think when I'm done with this TT02R build, which I do plan to use the AMG body on, it would be a shame to have a botched body on the chassis. Just it would be a disservice to it, basically. So basically what's going to happen to this TT02 is I'm taking a lot of the hop-ups off of this one. The hop-ups I'll be taking off of this one are the aluminum front bumper support, the bling part. Everyone's got to have bling. So I'll be removing that. I'll be removing the aluminum shock towers. I'll be removing my aluminum racing shocks, and that's about it. In the aluminum battery tray and the battery posts. Those are all getting removed from this TT02, and they'll instead go onto the R, because the R is going to be like this crazy build that I've only seen like maybe one other person on the internet and just in general do. Once I can get this stuff off, I'll really get into it. But basically, for those who don't know, there's lots of TT02s. Tamiya has made so many of these things. There's so many different versions. And really, I think that the standard is only good if you literally do not own RC cars, or just aren't really into the hobby in terms of like having a lot of stuff, but you still want to build a kit. So like, it's good if you don't mind maybe buying just a cheap basic like 2-channel radio. Maybe you had a nickel metal battery lying around from an RTR or something, and you can buy a 15-20 buck just basic servo and just get started. It's good for that. Because really fundamentally the only upgrades that need to be done on a stock TT02 are get full ball bearings and go oil shocks. But I'm not someone who is brand new to the hobby and doesn't have a whole lot of stuff. So I started looking around and I saw the TT02R and I was like, man, for all the hop-ups that thing has, it really makes the standard TT02 to me look like a waste of money. The TT02R has full aluminum drive shafts, propeller joints, it has steel dog bones, diff cups, and wheel axles. It has turnbuckles all through the steering system. It has oil shocks as standard. It has ball bearings as standard. It has an aluminum motor mount. And it comes with the speed gearing, which is a 27-tooth pinion with a 68-tooth spur. So overall, I think it's a good value for how much it costs, which is $138 on most hobby stores before taxes or shipping. But it doesn't include the standard electronics. It doesn't come with the torque tune motor, and it doesn't come with the ESC, which I still have installed here. It's the TT02S. I don't know if the new standard TT02s will come with the 04S now, but just in general, it doesn't have any electronics, and it doesn't have a body. So I was thinking, I already have a body because I have a standard TT02, but it would cost so much money to get like the aluminum drive shaft and propeller joints and basically just all the parts that it had aluminum. It would just cost way too much to just try to get them separately, in my opinion. So I got an R. It's not built. It's just, for now, it's just sitting in the box. But that's gonna change once I get some parts that I already ordered. Actually, once they finally get shipped over. Because the thing about the R that I think is good is that it pretty much maxes out the chassis in the areas that you're never going to really change. The R doesn't have adjustable upper arms, which I kind of touched on this earlier. There is no camber on the TT02, so you don't get any extra grip in corners when the body rolls. And if you don't know much about the TT02, the only way to describe its upper arms is they're not very good. Lots of slop, and they're kind of heavy. And all like the aluminum upgrades that give you adjustable arms, so like Racing's aluminum arms, they're just really heavy, and they still don't get rid of the slop just due to the fundamental nature of how they even mount onto the body, or the chassis rather. So the TT02R just maxes out the aspects of the car that you'd want maxed out and you aren't going to change anyway, and leaves the other parts that you'd probably switch out stock. And Tamiya has some upgrades to allow you to adjust the upper arms. They have the TT02 adjustable upper arm set. Few issues with that though. One, it's gray, and the rest of the car's black, and I think that looks really stupid. Second issue is, just like the Racing aluminum one, if you really care about performance, they're absurdly heavy. They have so much extra plastic than the standard part. It's kind of ridiculous, because if you look at it, it looks a bit... It just looks ridiculous. It's a lot of unnecessary plastic, so unnecessary weights. But at least it works, and it gives you adjustable camber. I just wish Tamiya actually made it black like the rest of the chassis, because that would have made too much sense. You could go that route. You could go with the Racing aluminum route, and you'd still have a heavy part, and you'd still have slop, but at least it would be blue and have a lot of bling. But I was thinking to myself, it's like, okay, by the time you get done spending all that money on hop-ups for the suspension, is the TT02 standard suspension really that good to like warrant upgrading it? Because Tamiya a few years ago released another TT02 called the TT02 Type S, and the Type S had a completely new suspension system or design. And I want to use that term loosely, because really all they did was they just took the TA05, another touring car chassis that they make. They took its suspension arms and knuckles and stuff like that, and then they just put it on the TT02 using a different mounting system for sake of the lower arms. And then they just had a ball stud get screwed in onto the front and rear shock towers for camber link. So instead of having these big old thick things, you just had like a little turnbuckle, similar to like what I just put on the buggy. And that suspension is just way better than the standard TT02 suspension. It widens the track width, it gives it adjustability, it's just better. But it had one problem that I heard. A lot of people were breaking the C-hub on the TT02 Type S, which was a shame because performance-wise, it was a ton better. But durability-wise, I guess it left a lot to be desired, and I heard people who were actually competitive in racing were just retiring them because they just kept on breaking, which I understand. So from a racer's perspective, it was good, but from just in general, it wasn't that great because they kept on breaking. Another problem with the S is it doesn't have anywhere near the same amount of upgrades as the R. What they did to the suspension, they pretty much, well, they upgraded the suspension by giving you a completely new suspension that was just way better, yes. But they removed all the upgrades that the R comes with, which I think sucks because a TT02 comes with a plastic drive shaft which flexes, which means that when running high-powered motors, you can get a lot of power loss from that. You can get slow acceleration and stuff like that from it just because your drive shaft literally warps, which is bad, obviously. You don't get the aluminum motor mount, which also stinks because it gives it a more secure, it gives your motor a more secure fit into the chassis, but also the aluminum motor mount does help with heat dissipation on the motor. So you lose those two things, which in my opinion are big because like the core TT02, it basically goes untouched in terms of like the chassis tub and the drivetrain, but they give you the upgraded suspension. And even though the suspension was ultra high performance compared to a standard TT02, the fact that it broke quite easily made it so like even the people who were trying to club race with it got fed up with it, and they just decided, why would you get a TT02S when you can just get a different chassis with a better drivetrain made out of better material, and you'll have a suspension that doesn't break easy. So that's where the TT02S had faults, and then later on they released a TT02SR, which had a few more upgrades, but surprisingly still had things like a plastic drive shaft and stuff, which again, like, it literally warps under extreme loads. I shouldn't even say extreme, it just warps in general. So like, you get power loss and stuff like that. I'm not even sure what the SR came with, like, as a whole. I just remember I would look at it and I don't know, it does not do anything for me, because what you gain out of the suspension for performance, you lose in the drivetrain, and then you end up with a suspension that's also a lot more fragile. So if you're someone who's inexperienced with driving and you want something to learn with, it doesn't have the strength to basically forgive you for messing up. So that's where the TT02S failed, in my opinion. But even worse is that you can't even seem to find S's anymore. I don't think they make them. So I'm thinking the problem with the TT02 standard is the suspension sucks. The upgrades to give you adjustability on the suspension aren't really ideal because you still have a lot of slop and they're heavy. So what's really the solution? So I did some looking around, and it turns out that the Tamiya TRF 419 suspension kit, so I'm talking the arms, the knuckles, front and rear, all those work on a TT02 if you have the TT02 Type S suspension mounting hardware. So that just means you have the metal rod with the steel suspension brackets front and rear. And thankfully Tamiya does sell that, all that hardware, and it even comes with a full set of steel diff cups, which can be quite expensive on their own. And you can get them shipped on eBay from sellers like, I think, Jazz Hobby, for a little over 30 bucks. And then the suspension, you can get that shipped for about 60 some. So if you figure, okay, you pay for a TT02R, and then you pay for that suspension upgrade, you are a bit over budget if you were looking at a TT02S, which was about 200, and the SR was like, I think, 250. But now you can actually mount the better suspension, the TRF419 suspension, which has, overall, it's a better suspension kit. It's stronger, and really I haven't heard anything negative about it. There are a few other things you'll need though. The big thing is mounting the turnbuckle for your upper control arm. If you have the Tamiya FRP shock towers, you can just go ahead and thread a locking ball nut onto it, and that'll give you a place to link the upper control arm onto the car, which is good. If you don't have the Tamiya FRP or carbon shock towers, then your only other option is this aluminum part that they made that goes on top of the diff cover. They come in pairs, so you have to buy 2 pairs, but it's an aluminum part that goes on top of the diff covers, and in the center of it on the side, so like directly above your diff cup joints, there is you can basically mount a ball stud, which is included, and then that can become your mounting point. So basically you can have a better suspension assembly than a Type S in pretty much every way, both in performance and durability, and you can go ahead and save money on all the upgrades that an R would give you for the drivetrain if you just go that route. So that's what I decided to do. Obviously, since I'm not building per like kit specifications, there are some issues with that, and also I'm literally just trying to get this ball stud mounted onto the bell crank, but it keeps on wanting to go in crooked. So bear with me on that. So it will cost a bit more than an S or an SR, sure, but you're gonna have a much better car overall in pretty much every way, because you're gonna have a maxed out drivetrain and you're gonna have better suspension, because even the SR only has a plastic drive shaft, which is, in my opinion, just ridiculous for it to even have that at its price point. And none of those versions include a body or electronics, so going with an R, you're not really at any more or less of you're not really at a disadvantage in that regard. So the idea is that I literally just straight up am going to take the TRF 419 suspension and I'm going to put them on a TT02R, and that's going to be the build. And I've only seen it done once on the internet. Granted, that guy, he's a Tamiya racing or Tamiya Cup Series racer, so he went with all Tamiya hop-ups, which I'm pretty sure cost a small fortune. I'm not racing in the Tamiya Cup because I don't care, so I'm saving money and buying other brand hop-ups that'll essentially get me to the same goal. But also means I'm free to actually go past his build if someone's made something that Tamiya hasn't that would be better. So I'm really looking forward to that. I probably have to wait like another week until I get all my parts. There were a few setbacks along the way, like, for example, I went to go buy the fiberglass reinforced TT02 tub chassis, and when I got it, it turns out it was just a standard plastic one, and I didn't find that out until like 4 months after buying it. So that's great. So I had to buy, you know, the real reinforced chassis this time. So I gotta wait on that. Also, I realized that the TRF 419 suspension kit that you can buy, there's a few things to note about that. One of which is it doesn't include every last bit of hardware that you need to actually complete the kit. What it doesn't include is it doesn't include the rear ball studs and spacers. And that's important because I know I am going to need spacers, and I think I'm going to need at least 2.5 or 3 millimeters of spacers for the ball studs that link to the steering tie rods. The instructions for the TRF 419, I believe, show one of the prior TRF touring cars, and it assumes that that's what you're going to be mounting it on. So like all the spacers that are included, they're showing you where to put them if you're mounting it onto that chassis, which I don't have. So I'm basically having to I'm just having to figure out how I'm going to install all this stuff. So like getting the control arms on the bottom, the A arms, is not an issue because the TT02S suspension kit has all that covered. So that part I don't have to worry about, but what I do have to worry about is making sure that the angles of my steering tie rods and the tie rods for the upper control arms are where they need to be when I go to mount them onto the car. So like I have ball studs, and I have basically all the necessary hardware to at least get the thing installed. What I'm not sure about is whether or not I have the appropriate spacers to make sure that the angles of all the tie rods and linkages are what they need to be, basically. So like, when I get all the parts, I do plan to stream the build, just because I think it would be good for that to be documented, to show off how that will all go together, because I do think it's a cool build to do, but the only guy who's done it and has a write-up of it, he just kind of just, I don't know, I don't think there's enough information in it to like 100% explain what all went into it and stuff. Because like, I know he has spacers in areas where like the TT02 Type S instructions don't have spacers, and I don't know if that's just a tuning preference he made, or if that was actually required to get the thing to work properly, stuff like that. So basically, for anyone who's really into TT02s, or maybe you have like a lot of spare parts for these things, you got like a spare tub, and maybe got like some spare electronics lying around, and you're looking to just have a cool build, or maybe just see where you can take a TT02, I think this is it. I really think this is the build to go for. I would just like to basically do my due diligence to the RC community to actually attempt it and completely document the entire process, so that way I can really show all the things that could potentially go wrong in the build, or things that, like, you know, weren't thought of beforehand that turn out to be a problem. I just think that would be a good thing to do, because what I'm planning to do, I mean, has it been done for? Yes, but like there's no like resources and there's no manual for what I'm doing, so basically when I get all the parts and probably do that build stream, which is probably going to be in a week or two, depending on when parts finally decide to get here, we're gonna find out how that works, because again, it's like I'm basically having to compare manuals between 3 different cars to see what's supposed to go where and what hardware is needed where. And it's taken a lot of time, just trying to get all the parts and make sure that they're all compatible with each other, and even then I'm not 100% sure I've actually managed to achieve that. So like, I might get some parts and they turn out to just not work at all. Who knows? Also, let me see if I have the pliers to work for this. But yeah, so far the big concerns about the build is basically shimming off ball studs to make sure that linkages are at the proper angle that they should be, or at least are recommended to be. Because, as I said, like, I've only seen this modification of a TT02 done once on the internet, and there's just not a whole lot of information available on it. So basically, I'm going into this just knowing that it is possible to achieve what I'm going to do with this TT02 build, but how I achieve it is just going to be left to me to basically figure it out as I go. I've looked at pretty much every image I could of that one guy's build, the one guy who got it done. It looks sick. I would really love to get it built. I just hope that when I actually go to do the stream for the build, that I did actually get everything that's required, because if not, I think it would be pretty disappointing to have to, like, oops, we're gonna end stream here because maybe I don't have enough ball studs or something. Or I don't have the correct length ball studs, or end up needing, like... Okay, the big thing is, I hope I actually got the correct length turnbuckle for the upper control arm. That was not included in the TRF 419 suspension kit. Also, wow, that ball stud is extremely tight. Ooh, I don't like how that feels. Look at this. It's not moving around freely. There's a lot of binds in that. I don't like that. Don't know what's going on there. These don't seem to be one-way ball connector ends. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so the TRF 419 suspension kit did not include a turnbuckle for the front control arms or the rear. So the upper control arms, front and rear, I had to basically check the TT02 Type S manual, saw they were 32 millimeters, and I've been told that the TRF 419 suspension kit on a TT02 has a ever so slightly thinner track width, but I'm hoping that that 32 millimeter turnbuckle is still the appropriate size. Because if it isn't, I'm gonna have to go shopping again, and then I gotta wait for China shipping. Because I bought 32 millimeter turnbuckles, but I had to get them from eBay from a Chinese seller, because Tamiya USA is like out of stock on quite a bit of turnbuckles, unfortunately. And man, these ball studs are just ultra tight. Wow. I don't know about that. So one of the problems I have on my TT02 is there is binds in the front arms. For sure, a lot of binds. Okay, that seemed to have gone well. I'm gonna do this one by hand. Popping in and out ball studs all day really does a number on your thumbs. Okay, so let me just try to get these, see which ones have slop or not. Well, you know, that one has slop. Let's try the other direction then. Because these might be one-way connectors. Man, this is a terrible angle. Come on. This is just a terrible angle to try to hold this in. And these pliers are so big and bulky and they slip. Come on. Man, that really wants to be stubborn, huh? And still bind on this side. Incredible. So I don't get it why I'm getting binds. I might just have to like what you call it? I guess sand down the inside a bit. I heard there's techniques to doing that, none of which I have the means to do at the moment. Really sucks. Oh, wow. I'm having to do this final one by hand with me. Wow, that really hurts. My thumb's been tortured by turnbuckles all day. And there's just no place for me to get some pliers to clamp down. And that ball stud actually still needs to be threaded. That's better yet. Oh, wow, that is gonna take a lot of force. Are these one way or no? They might be one way. In which case, real quick. Okay, these are open end, so I can do this. Wow, that popped it off. Okay, that's great. I needed it on there. These might be one way. Sheesh, that's tight. Okay. Okay, so now they actually have the same side on each side here. What did I do with my big pliers? There they are. You gotta be kidding, come on. Yeah, another thing too is I don't know which side is actually the side that's supposed to go into the turnbuckle. Let me get some light on this. Okay, I can definitely see why there is bind inside these heads. Okay, it looks like this side is supposed to go in. Went in fairly easy. Which means that this one also probably needs to be flipped upside down. There we go. Okay. I think it'll just be a matter of actually cleaning out those, the insides of those ball studs. Or the connectors, rather. And who would have thought turnbuckle, just getting the ball ends to snap in would be this difficult. Wish there was an easier way for me to get them in, but I just, there's no room for me to clamp anything down. So I'm just gonna have to brute force it. Which I don't have very much of. Then, yeah, my thumb is really killing me from all the twisting of the other turnbuckles I had to do. There we go. Come on. Come on, come on. The actual pliers here just aren't, the teeth aren't big enough on it. Okay, so main problems is I'm trying to force it down onto the swivel pieces of the steering mechanism, and they don't really want to allow me to actually put them in there because they flex. And the suspension itself flexes, of course. Try to hold it up and just force it in. That arm's at a... Okay, this is exactly what I was referring to then. Let me get this other ball connector and then I'll show this. This is kinda what I was talking about regarding the TT02R build. One of the concerns I had. Okay, that's in. Alright. So I'm not really getting any bumps here. But that is like limited my downward travel on the front, hasn't it? Looks like it. Anyway, so what I needed right here in that knuckle is I need a ball nut, or a ball stud that's longer threading, and then I needed to space that out. so yeah, I'll have to end up doing that for my the TT02R, because that will also need a ball stud in there, which means I'll need a longer one than what I have on hand. Then I'll need spacers to get this arm level without forcing the knuckle upwards in order to achieve, you know, leveling the whole thing out. Because what has essentially happened now is the droop has been reduced, which probably on a street car isn't a bad thing. But it also just means that now my shocks are trying to fight. They're like constantly putting pressure now when they shouldn't be. Just because these tie rods are at the angle that they're at. It's just simply the difference in height from where the knuckle wants to rest at and where these tie rods mount over in here. So that's good to know, because yeah, now this front end is like a lot lower and I got a rake forward going on. Not that that's a bad thing, it's just it basically means that now my ride height is being affected by my steering. You know, it's just being it's being manipulated by the steering tie rod, which is obviously not what I want. Ideally, the only thing that should be affecting it is your shocks and where you put the collars at. So that's good to know. Very good to know, because just means I'll have to make sure that I'll probably need 9mm long threads on my ball studs for here, which I actually think are included in the TRF 419 suspension kit, I'm pretty sure. But it just means I'll need to make sure that I have those, and then I'll need a spacer for that, and then I can avoid that issue. Regarding this current TT02, I'm gonna be basically focusing all my efforts on the TT02R build. So I'll go ahead and probably get some spacers for this thing to fix it up, but that'll be later. This TT02 will largely remain as it is right now, outside of reverting back to a lot of the stock plastic parts. But as far as like the motor is concerned, that's just kind of, the motor is gonna remain what it is right now, and this build will basically just get downgraded just a little bit, and then call that done. I'll just throw the rest of the screws in here. But yeah, so it's good that I accomplished all the work that I was looking to do, and in turn I found out something I'll have to take note of for the R build. So let me go ahead and put this thing up, and I'll have to go shopping for spacers. I mean, the ride height's fine, in my opinion. It's just, I don't want the tie rods to limit how high the ride height can be. That shouldn't be their function. Also, having the angle of the tie rod not be the same as the overall angle of your, I think it's the A-arms, your lower control arm, can give you bump steer. I forget exactly what causes bump steer, but I believe that's what it is. Don't quote me on that though. So let me get this stuff put up. This is my TT02 miscellaneous parts, some of which will be going back on my current TT02 as it gets downgraded. So I'll just go ahead and chuck this wrench in here. And then let me clear off my desk overall, and then I'll give a quick tour of the TT02R and what I have in the box for it, and then we'll call the stream finished then, and then hopefully I have everything that's needed for the TT02R build, so that's when I'll be back, and it'll hopefully be the entire car build in one session. And hopefully it won't take as long just on the turnbuckles alone as it did for me today, because that would not be ideal for anyone. but I do think that the R build will be extremely interesting. So, if you liked what you saw here, or at least just enjoy building in general, you may find the R build to be exceptionally interesting. Anyway, here's the TT02R in the box. So, just received it recently, and I got a lot of stuff for this thing. So, while I'm here giving the tour of the parts, I do want to run through some stuff regarding the parts that I bought. Just because, like, if you're interested in doing this for your own TT02, there's some things you're going to have to buy that aren't 100% say obvious at first. So I'm just gonna ignore like the R parts, because like you can just look up what a TT02R is and you'll know what it comes with. So let's talk basics of basics with this build. So first things first, Robinson Racing steel pinion gear, because the Tamiya pinion gears, they suck. Next, literally only got this Racing aluminum steering set, just because when I go to install this on the reinforced chassis, I don't want tap screws in it. And unfortunately, the standard steering requires you to use those tap screws that are the step screws, and they're tappers. Tamiya does sell those tap screws with a hex head and machine thread, but it's like $8 just for 2 little screws and an Allen key that you're never going to use again, or you may not even use in the first place to install. So I just said, you know what, by the time you spend $8 on that, may as well just get the whole thing aluminum. You get the ball bearing steering, and it's going to be rock solid, and it adds the bling factor, and it gets rid of a lot of slop, which is what TT02s are known for. This is just hex hardware for the build. Okay, so let's talk CVDs real fast. So I bought some CVDs for the XV01 because the dog bones on the TT02 Type S are 42 millimeters in length, and the XV01 CVDs here from Racing are 42 millimeters in length, so we won't know if they'll 100% fit on the TRF 419 suspension kit that I'll be using until we try it. But I'm hoping that since the TT02S has like a very, very similar suspension and it uses this length shafts, I'm hoping that they'll fit and work fine on the TRF 419 suspension. Since we're on the subject of shafts, I got some. These are Tamiya dog bones. I'm gonna put these on the rear, CVDs on the front, dog bones on the rear. These are also 42 millimeters in length. They were made for some other Tamiya car, probably like a TA something. I don't remember. Ball connectors, because I needed these for the turnbuckle shafts, which haven't arrived yet. Here we have one pair of the part that I'll need to mount the turnbuckles, the upper control arms front and rear. If you have Tamiya FRP or carbon shock towers, you do not need these for the suspension overhaul, but since I plan to use the Racing aluminums, which are designed to use the stock TT02 suspension, I needed to buy these, and it's not really a big deal because these are better, the mounting position's better than what you'd have with the FRP or the carbon from Tamiya. But at any rate, this goes on. There's 2 of these. Let me just take this out. But there's 2 of these, and you basically put these on top of your diff cover for the TT02, and then right here in the center there's threads to mount the ball studs to, and that's what you're going to mount the turnbuckle for your camber adjustment onto, rather than going onto the shock tower. And if I take out the manual, real quick see the illustrations for that. So it's a bit far for me to reach, but yeah, basically you can see that when you go to install your top diff cover, you're going to put those two aluminum pieces on top, and then provided are machine screws that make up the added width of that and the whole group of parts. And so that's how you're going to secure the diff covers onto the chassis. It's just, in doing so, you also get the mounting position for the control arms, which I wouldn't have otherwise, because again, I'm using the Yeah Racing aluminum shock towers. And then the main thing that's going to make this build is the fact that, well, here it is, the TRF 419 suspension kit. So I don't have all the parts that I bought for the build just yet, which is why I'm not doing it yet. Probably tomorrow I'm going to end up with the TT02 Type S suspension mounting kit, but at any rate, here's the suspension. So here's the control arms, one front and one rear on here. These are the Tamiya carbon fiber reinforced plastic arms. So if you keep up with Tamiya products, you'll know that they just announced like the TRF 420X recently, probably about a week or two ago. This is the same suspension kit that's used on that. So basically, the idea is I'm going to make a TT02 that has the same suspension as their top-end TRF touring car. It won't beat their top-end TRF touring car, but I don't really care because I don't race anyway, and I'm just basically building it just because, one, it would be cool, and two, I have a lot of parts for TT02s in general, so like anything about the drivetrain, the tub, those core components, I have stuff for them. So, you know, I have parts for them. I'm dedicated to TT02s. I love these things. So, here's the front knuckles. Right, so, again, this is the whole kit for the suspension. And this is going to mount onto a TT02, and I think it's going to be absolutely insane how cool it's going to be when it's done. Because it'll finally get rid of the TT02's biggest flaw, and that's the suspension on it is garbage. And the upgrades for it are kind of like fix one problem, create another sort of deal, or don't address all the problems in general, which are slop, lack of adjustment, and then weight. So I'm hoping that when this is all done, this build is just going to be just so cool. Because again, there's no manual I can follow for this. This is all just going to be, you know, just put the parts together and just hope it works. Here's the included flange tubes and the spacers. I'm hoping that all the spacers in here will be enough to get the angles for like the steering tie rod and the tie rods for your upper control arms. You know, just correct, basically. The big issue with the TT02 still, though, even after I get done with all this stuff, is just the fact that there is, by default, no place to mount a anti-roll bar. So, the arms do. So for the front it's here, and for the rear it's right here, that little ball end right there. So you have mounting positions for anti-roll bar on the arms, but there's no place on the actual chassis for the anti-roll bar. I've seen some 3D print stuff that might work out. To be honest, I'm not too worried about it, just because it's more important for me to actually get the suspension installed and then worry about anti-roll bars later. I mean, it's still going to drive without them. These are the ball studs for the anti-roll bars, and then these black ones are for the steering and on top of the knuckle for the camber tie rod. And if you're not familiar with the TRF 419 suspension, it's pretty cool. They got these like aluminum inserts that you put onto the control arms front and rear. So you can see there's this little opening on the control arm right here. it's in the same shape, you can drop those inserts, these aluminum inserts, in there, and that is what determines your lower mounting position for your suspension onto the arm. The only problem with it is basically with the included inserts, they're asymmetrical. So if I just show one right here, you can see that the hole is off to one side. So the idea is you can have an inner position if you put it in one way, and if you flip it around, you can have a position towards the outside. But if you want in the middle, you have to buy a completely different insert, and it'll come in a whole kit. But I'm pretty sure the Tamiya tax on that is quite something. So that's about the only disadvantage to that system. Other than that, it's absolutely fine. It includes the grub screws with thread lock already applied for them, and it has the 3mm shafts to capture the knuckles and everything onto the arms. And yeah, so really the only thing you're missing if you're gonna do this sort of thing, from what I saw so far, is just, it assumes that you're going to be putting this onto, I guess, one of the previous TRF cars, so it assumes you're already going to have ball studs for your rear camber links. And outside that, I should show this. This doesn't really affect the TT02, but there's these holes right here in the arm. They want you to put a big set screw in there, and I guess that's a droop adjustment screw. But with the way the suspension mounts onto the TT02 with the Type S suspension mounting kit, that is not needed, so you don't have to worry about that, but you do have to worry about supplying ball studs for the rear, and they are probably going to have to be 9mm length ball studs. Again, I've been having to like reference the TT02 Type S manuals to see how its suspension gets mounted. And it's not the same as this, so it's not going to be exact, you know. So I don't know if the 5mm length ball studs used on the back of the Type S with no spacers will work absolutely fine, or if I need to change them and get 9mm length with the appropriate spacers. So that's just something I'm just going to have to figure out when I go to build it. But that's also why I want to stream the build in its entirety, because I've only seen this sort of build on the TT02 done once on the internet, and there's not a whole lot of information around it, so I think it would just be cool to build it and document the entire build process to find out what works and what doesn't, what's actually needed, and more importantly, what the actual real cost of this type of build is. And I can tell you right now, a TA08 would be cheaper and probably give you better performance overall, at least in its stock kit form, because at least then you can have anti-roll bars. As I said, I just like TT02s in general, so I just thought this would be a cool, pretty unique build to do, so I just said, why not? And yeah, plenty of X hardware for the build. So yeah, that's going to be the Type S build. So all I'm waiting for... Oh, should probably show this. This is just going to be placeholder really, but I got a brushless motor with a brushless ESC. It's sensorless, it's not ideal for racing. It's just going to be something to at least let it move. And I still have to pick out a steering servo. I have servos lying around. Probably not that good, but again, just something to at least test it and make sure everything's working. So that's the TT02R build. That was the reveal of that new project. So if you're interested in that, it'll probably, the live stream for that will probably happen maybe this coming weekend or the weekend after. It just depends when parts arrive. But I will be doing the build as soon as I get everything. It's just that's where I'm at so far. I'm waiting on a few more parts. It's really just the Type S suspension mounting kit, and I believe just the turnbuckles, and that's pretty much it.